Okay, this is a walkthrough of the research evaluation template. So I'm going to assign each of you a different article. You are going to review it based on these evaluative criteria, and then you're going to share that with the rest of the class, walking through it in the same video manner. So the first thing you're going to be looking at is the power of the intervention. So whatever experiment I give you, was the intervention long enough, appropriately designed, deep enough to actually bring about the results. The one I'm going to be using as a sample is the effect of a computer simulation activity versus a hands-on activity on product creativity in technology education. So of course we can skip through all this introduction stuff because we don't really care about that right now. And we can just go straight to the method. So I'm going to look at the intervention here, right? What were they doing? Well, as you recall, they assigned some kids to a hands-on Lego building activity and another to a computer design activity. They had one of the groups who had the Legos sort their bricks for 5 minutes, and during that 5-minute time, the other group was watching a video on how to use the program. And that was a good thing. We'll talk about that later. And then they're given this prompt. Pretend that you are a toy designer working for a Lego company, blah, blah, blah. Use your creativity and make a creature that is original in appearance yet useful to the toy manufacturer. One more thing, the creature you construct must be able to fit within a 5-inch cubed box, which means you must stay within the limits of your green base plate and make your creature no higher than 13 bricks. 25 minutes to complete, and so on. So that's it. Right now, when we're thinking about how that kind of works out in the theory they were trying to test was that creativity can be enhanced by the use of computer simulations or computer software. Now, in this case, I would say that the intervention itself was relatively weak. They had 25 minutes to use this. They learned about it for 5 minutes. There was one single task that they were using it. And when you're thinking about, right, whether or not I am designing a creature, I would probably rather be using the bricks because it's hands-on. The computer simulation gives me no advantage in this particular case. In other cases where I would actually have to build things or rearrange things, like say writing on a computer versus a piece of paper with a pen, I can move things around, rewrite things, paste in quotes, reformat much easier in a computer. And I could then theoretically get much better and more creative in how I want to write or approach a particular problem. In this case, it doesn't do that at all. So this intervention is weak for all those reasons. The second thing I want you to look at is whether or not all participants benefited. Well, in this case, all the students did get to do something that was kind of fun, although the benefits were not great really towards any group. One group got to use some new computer software, the other group got to play with Legos. So, moderate, but nothing that fantastic. In terms of the sample size, right? If we look at our sample, right, we have subjects for 7th grade technology education students from 3 different middle schools. As we learn later on, a total of, 58 subjects were involved, and they were randomly assigned to one of the experimental conditions. As far as 29 students in each condition being enough people to determine whether or not there was an enhancement in creativity scores or creativity products, that's plenty to detect any kind of moderate or modest effect. If you wanted to find a really, really small effect, you'd need more people. But because they were running one single test, this is plenty of people. They didn't need any more. They had adequate statistical power. Now, the good thing that these authors do is they go through and talk about what they are using. They reference many different articles that have used it before. They talk about some kind of validation that we haven't really covered in this class, but they're basically trying to make sure, in this case, that the subscales of original and useful actually work well together. They are internally consistent, meaning that each subscale is measuring the same thing. In this case, 0.93 and 0.92 are really good. That's very high. So the tool they were using was validated. Another thing that they did was that when they were training people how to use this, they did a pilot study and they did run reliability analyses on whether or not the raters were actually agreeing. So those are very good things that they did in order to use valid instruments and make sound decisions. In terms of control of other variables, they didn't really block or match or do anything like that. This is a weakness of this study. They should have looked at students' creativity scores, general academic functioning, use of hands-on or spatial reasoning, things that are readily available. I mean, there are tons of tests where you could have administered this to the students prior to doing this task, the control for that. But they didn't. So that's a weakness of this particular study. The last thing I want you to look at is the validity threats assessed. And these are the ones I want you to look at: history, maturation, regression, attrition, selection bias, reactive effects, ordering effects, and testing. Okay, so for history, right? History, as we recall, is this idea of anything that happens during the experiment or prior to the experiment. Not really worried about things that happen during the experiment because it's so short. But in this case, they did have the students sort bricks, so they'd have the same amount of time. But that is something that actually could be a liability, but I don't think that it is. Randomization also takes care of other history factors. When we think of maturation, this study is so short that it's not really applicable. When we think of statistical regression, randomization takes care of that. Some students will perform unusually creatively. Some will kind of be very much more blasé or run-of-the-mill. And that should all come out in the wash if students are randomly assigned. When we think of attrition, that's another not really applicable thing. I don't think that in 25 minutes you're going to have these massive amounts of people leaving the study, although it could happen. And if it did happen, they should have noted it, but it didn't happen, so it's not really an issue. For selection bias, we have random assignment. And the issue here, though, is that it was not random selection. This is a kind of, you could call it a snowball sample, I suppose. Where they identified teachers who were willing to participate, and then those teachers got their students to do it. A teacher's willingness should have no relationship to what the students actually do, so I'm not really worried about that either. So that's not really a bad thing. And the random assignment does take care of any selection bias that might exist between the different groups. In terms of reactive effects, again, these are the cues from the experimenter. One good thing that they did here was that they gave everybody the same description, the same script. And that's very important to do, in that it's read the same way, or if it's not read and the students actually read it themselves, that they are just given the same sheet of paper that they're supposed to read and follow. There was no feedback there were no cues that were given regarding how well the students, or I shouldn't say how well, but what the students thought they should be doing. In terms of the scorers, you could also throw kind of the reactive effects in here, although it's really more of a scoring measurement bias thing, in that they printed out all the 3D figures that were made on computer paper, so they recreated them in the computer program, and then the raters just looked at those to judge the creativity, so they weren't being cued as to which one should have been rated more or less creative. Ordering effects, not really a problem. There was only one manipulation, so you don't really have to worry about the order in which that manipulation occurred. If we talk about testing, because no pre-test was given, not an issue. Everyone went through the same amount of time. This is again that whole everyone did something for 25 minutes. So fatigue would have been an equally potential problem for either condition. So the overall conclusion, it's a pretty weak article. Poor design and weak manipulation for those reasons that we talked about. You wouldn't expect there to be a difference here. In this particular situation, you need to give people computers if you're trying to get them to be more creative, where it will actually have some kind of effect, where it's not actually taking you away from the stuff that you can easily manipulate in a rapid fashion. They don't have many controls to get at confounds like general academic functioning, visual or spatial reasoning, and things like that. Some positives, though, they did use validated measures. They had a control group, and they employed random assignment to each particular group. So that's basically what I want you to do. Fill this out and give me an overall conclusion that summarizes what you found. That's it. Shoot me an email if you have any questions.